Welcome to the Wise Idea Weekly Podcast. I am so excited to have you join in with us for these next few episodes. I've got some special guests lined up that will be with me each week, and we are literally going to take some time to hear from the stories of these individuals from the standpoint of what happens in life when God does not, or seemingly does not, answer your prayers. One young lady who is in her 40s or approaching 40 and has been celibate for 20 plus years, who thought in her timeline and time frame that 10 years or 15 years ago she'd be married with kids by now. That's not the reality. Another guest who is a single adult lady and had as a greatest desire of hers to have children, and that has not happened. And she has literally created a movement called Childless, Not by Choice. I don't want to take a whole long time in the introduction of preparing you for these few episodes that are coming, and so I'm going to give you space now to jump right in. On this episode today, we're going to hear from Mina, and Mina is going to talk to us today about what does it mean to really have a woman's story when seemingly God doesn't answer your prayers. All right, friends, welcome to the Wise Idea Weekly Podcast with Christopher J. Harris. I am your host, Christopher J. Harris, and we are extremely honored that you've tuned in to today's show. Welcome to the party. Every single week, we are providing tools for inspiration and wisdom for life. We inspire everyday people to live wise lives. In fact, we are providing strategies for hearts to be inspired and heads to become wise. I'm so thankful each week to have all of you join in. And, I'm personally passionate about life and leadership and family and marriage and ministry, of course, the church. And so that's the focus of this podcast. John Maynard Keynes was quoted as saying one time that ideas shape the course of history. And I like to edit that and say that wise ideas positively change the course of lives. Make no mistake about it, and we say it all the time, when wisdom becomes a part of your life gets better in every single area. And so I'm excited that you've been tuning in, hanging out with us, and responding to everything that we've got going on here. Guess what, guys? If you're new to us, I want to tell you that we release a brand new podcast every Thursday morning. And a lot of you may listen to this podcast with friends or in groups or in circles. And we'd love to hear about those listening parties or those groups that are happening around the world, and particularly in the United States, which is where we are based. Feel free to send us a message at info, I-N-F-O, at thewисeideapodcast.com. Thank you to those of you that have been sharing the podcast and its tools and its information and all of that with your family and friends and on social media. That absolutely means a lot to me, and I'm so thankful for it. Of course, every single podcast, the notes and the resources that we mention on the podcast are available for us to send to you. And so all you have to do is go to thewисeideapodcast.com, and you'll see all of our episodes and more resources. You can find out a little bit more about me if you happen to stumble upon this podcast and are wondering who in the world is this guy, Christopher J. Harris. Of course, you can also email us with questions, ideas, and thoughts. We'd be glad to receive those and hear those. And here's your personal invitation. If you're not already subscribed, to subscribe so that you can get the podcast and the notes and the resources right into your inbox. And I'm so excited today because I've got a great friend of mine, a great guest that's going to be on with us today. Today's podcast is focusing on one of our four prongs, dealing with family and marriage, and in today's case, singleness and wholeness as an individual. She believes that so many people have gotten the wrong message about singleness, wholeness, celibacy, and whether or not there are people in the world that can actually do it and do it the right way or not. So we're going to dig into all of that. Mina, how are you today?
I am great. How are you?
I'm doing absolutely wonderful. So listen, when people look on the show notes, they're going to see your last name. And I want you to pronounce it correctly so that I don't butcher it up. How about that?
Okay. It is Nyenke.
Uh-huh.
I'll say it again.
Yeah.
Nyenke.
Nyenke. And
Yes.
and what is that?
It is Nigerian. I happen to be a first-generation American. Both of my parents immigrated to this country from Nigeria, and I am the first generation on both sides to be born here in America. So it is Nigerian, and I am too.
Well, that's awesome. So that means that you have you kind of live in two worlds or three worlds when it comes to culture, huh?
I do, and it's been an interesting ride.
Tell me really quickly. This is not the focus of today's interview, but tell me really quickly. Tell me some Nigerian food that we should try if we ever get a chance.
Okay, well, if you look on social media, you will see that there is this big debate about this dish called Jollof Rice. Have you ever heard of it?
I have, yes.
Okay, so Jollof Rice is like a tomato-based, spicy type of dish. You could liken it to Spanish rice, if you would, but it's way, 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 way better. And different countries in Africa have their own versions of jollof rice. And certain countries have jollof wars, if you will. So about which country's jollof rice is better. Obviously, I'm going with Niger jollof, but there's Ghanaian jollof, Senegalese jollof, but that is like what fried chicken is like to Black people. That is what jollof rice is to Nigerian people. Like if there's a party and we don't halfway want to go, we like, y'all gonna have jollof fare? If they say yes, I'm coming.
That's funny. Well, that's good. I think many of our listeners will go check that out. So let's jump in and talk. I invited.
Okay, I'm ready.
Yeah, I invited you to be a part of this podcast because a few months ago, I was strolling through my Instagram timeline. And of course, you and I follow each other on Instagram, but scrolling through my timeline and saw this post that you had posted. And it had this nice, bright pink graphic on it. And in the corner, it said Mina Says on it. And so I read it. And at first, when I saw it, I'm like, wow, okay, that's pretty strong. And so I was like, let me go and see some other things here. Maybe this is this a one-off post, or was this a trend here? And of course, I went and checked out your timeline just to see that you had posted literally and a whole other set of ideas and thoughts that may not be widely shared in our culture today. And one of the hashtags that you've been consistently using is I've got a story to tell. And so tell us really quickly a little bit about that story. And let me just say, I mean, some of the posts that I've seen that you have on there, you don't need sex to live. There's more to life than getting married. Queens don't pursue kings. Don't be out here looking like hope deferred. Celibacy is easy when nobody wants you. So like, man, you're digging into it. And, of course, for me, I am a family advocate, happily married with kids and all of that. But I also understand that that's not everybody's reality. And even for my podcast, we're not afraid to deal with some of the hard topics. So this is going to be a good one today. So tell me a little bit about your story and this story that you have to tell.
Well, Mina Says has been it's been cooking for a long time, and I kind of got pushed out of the boat last year to share testimony with some people that I was hosting with our friend Kenneth Sean. But really, it's been cooking for several years. As a matter of fact, you have a part to do with this story. I don't know if you remember, maybe 3 years ago, remember when Paris first started out and it was really, really hot, and you would do these scopes about relationships and things like that. There was a particular Periscope that you did, a broadcast that you did, where you challenged some of your viewers to take a year off dating. I don't know if you remember that, because I reached out to you and I was like, oh, I want to do it, but I thought it's telling me to do it.
That's funny.
And
I think you were trying to throw me under the bus a little bit just then, because I have not been periscoping as much as I used to. But anyway.
No shade. But I reached out to you and shared some of my fears and concerns about taking a year off of dating just to kind of work on me. And I had no idea that it was going to start me on a journey. I think that was 2015. It was going to start me on this journey of healing and deliverance that I didn't even know that I knew that I needed. And so I took the year off dating, and it was, it was cool. But maybe about a year after that, I found myself in a place, and I want to kind of get the good balance between not being too to begin right to the point. But about a year after that, I started going to a counselor. I started seeing a counselor. I happened to be getting my nails done one day, and I was sharing with a girlfriend of mine some issues I was having with my mother. And I told her, a couple of things about our history. For the most part, my relationship with my mother has been pretty tumultuous. And as I was telling my friend my nails about some things, she began to cry as she was doing my nails. And I was comforting her, like, it's okay, you don't have to cry, it's okay. And she was like, no, Mina, no one should have ever had to go through that. I think you should talk to somebody. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, sure, I need to talk to somebody. Long story short, she actually reached out to a Christian counselor at our former church and paid for a session to meet with this woman and kind of unpack some of the things that I was sharing. And when I got there, I had already made up in my mind that I would give it a try for at least 90 days. I would see how it would go. And, we go from there. So I see this Christian counselor, and who is now like my spiritual mother. And she asked me to tell her my story from conception up until that present point. And she just started scribbling, and I'm telling her my story, remembering things that I had forgotten. And today I still hold this record. She has never taken as many intake notes for first than she did for me. She had like 9 to 10 pages front and back full of notes. And at the end of the session, she told me that for someone with the level of trauma that I had experienced, she would need to see me more than once a month. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And she was like, I probably need to see you every 2 weeks. And I said, well, who's going to pay for it then? And she said that we would work something out, but she really wanted to help me, and really money wasn't an issue. I still paid her, I paid her what I could, but we worked on this journey of gradual healing and deliverance. And my first homework assignment after that session was to mourn the relationship I never had with my mother. And so I thought that was very difficult because my mother is still very much alive. And so here I am going on this process of healing and deliverance, and going to see my counselor, doing my assignments every 2 weeks. Maybe at around June of 2016, I started to feel very, very heavy. And what I know at the time was that I was entering into a depression, because I was having to deal with all of these issues I never even really knew were issues. I think sometimes in the Black community, and when I say Black, I'm not just talking about African Americans, I'm talking about all, brown people throughout the diaspora. We have a survivalist mentality, and we deal with all different types of trauma in our life, not recognizing it's trauma, without getting help, without properly addressing some issues. And we just pack stuff down, and keep going, because we have to survive. We have to live life. We have to go to work. If I don't work, how are we going to pay the rent? How are we going to pay bills?
All right, guys, we'll be right back. I know you are right in the middle of an incredible conversation, and you were gleaning things from this incredible conversation that we're having currently. We'll get right back to it. I was enjoying myself as well, but I wanted to interject really quickly and just invite you, if you are listening to this podcast, that probably means that you are also on social media. Well, listen, I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. As a matter of fact, y'all, guess what? I'm also on Pinterest. I would love, 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 love to have you as a part of my tribe, my following, my connection, my social media family. And so if you're on any of those platforms, I'm at CJ Harris. O-N-E, CJ Harris, O-N-E. Would love to connect with you. So while this commercial is even going on, before we get back into the conversation, why don't you go online right now, pull your devices out, pull your computer out, and hit the follow button, hit the friend request button, hit the engage button, and we'd be so glad to have you as a part of our social media following and family. Not only that, as you listen to this podcast, you may be hearing things that are insightful for you, things that are being shared where the light bulb goes off. I would love to hear about those moments. As a matter of fact, you may be listening and there may be questions that you have or things you'd like to share with us that you're hearing. And either way, we'd love to hear from you. So please send us an email. The email address is info, at ChristopherJHarris.com. Again, that's info@ChristopherJHarris.com. Not only that, but lastly, if you have a project or a book or a platform that you'd like to promote or advertise with us, you're thinking that this would be a great audience for you to reach and connect with, we'd love to start a conversation with you about that. So please send us an email, again, at info@ChristopherJHarris.com. And in turn, we'll send you an information sheet and be glad to start that incredible conversation of partnership with you. With that said, guys, let's get right back into this amazing conversation that we're having. Be sure to pull your notes back out. It's going to be fun. Let's go.
Trauma is not just rape or molestation. It could be the loss of a job. It could be a car accident. It could be the death of a parent, child, or a close friend. It could be being in what we'll call a natural disaster. There's so many different levels of trauma we go through in life that we never address. And I quickly found myself, and now, mind you, at the time, I was a tongue-talking, fire-baptized Christian, and I was depressed.
Yeah, Mina, hold on for just one
second. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Let me just mention really quickly, because I do know that I have a diverse audience. And so let me just really quickly give a couple definitions or a couple quick explanations to a couple of the statements that you've made. And then I'm excited to kind of hear the rest of this, your timeline here. You threw out a phrase called healing and deliverance. And so for those that may not be in the community of faith, whether it's, charismatic or Baptist or, maybe non-denominational, some people that can be a little spooky. But basically what it means is that there's this thought and this idea, and there's dozens and dozens of scriptures throughout the Bible where God invites us to walk in freedom, where there is nothing from our past or our present that holds us hostage. And as Mina has talked about trauma, there's oftentimes things that happen in our past that if we don't deal with it, it becomes traumatic. And we then have these coping mechanisms where we learn to cope with the trauma without actually getting healed from the trauma. The other phrase that she used that, again, depending on your faith persuasion, tongue talking, is simply this notion of speaking in tongues. And individuals will often embrace that as a part of their walk with God under this notion of being filled with the Holy Spirit. And so don't want that to scare anybody, but just wanted to make sure that we provided some quick explanation to that. So Mina, jump right back in.
Okay, good. I'm glad you did that. I just assumed everybody was a Bible-toting believer. So, here I am unpacking all these issues from my past, not really realizing how toxic a lot of my upbringing was and how it affected me. Because, when you live your own life, you're just living your own life. Unfortunately, it's normal to you. Like, I knew certain things were wrong, and I knew that things were bad. I knew that there had to be some very long lasting effects to my parents being divorced when I was 3 or 4 years old and not having a relationship with my father. And I knew that those things could affect me, but I didn't realize how they had planted seeds as a young child and were affecting my relationships with people, and especially men too. And so we're dealing with these issues in counseling, and my whole life is now starting to be affected because these issues that I'm dealing with are now overflowing and spilling into my personal life. And my work performance actually started to go down at my job. And I found myself dreading going to work. I didn't like the job already because, you know, most people don't love their jobs. They just go to work to get paid so they can pay bills. So I'm not unlike most people, but I found myself dreading to go. Like there was such a heaviness on me that there were times, mornings when I would drive to work, and I had like a 45 to a 1 hour commute to work. And there would be mornings where I would be driving to work, trying to think of ways of how I could get out of going there because I was just tired. I wanted to go to sleep for like 2 weeks and not have to deal with anything. I didn't want to have to go to work. I didn't want to have to cook. I didn't want to have to go to the gym. I didn't want to have to talk to anybody. I just wanted to go to sleep for like 2 weeks. Obviously, this is not a make-believe life, so that wasn't possible. But I found myself driving to work thinking, okay, what can I do to avoid going to work? And I started to entertain thoughts of running myself into a ditch. And I thought, well, I don't want to kill myself all the way. I just want to like maybe break my leg so I could have a medical reason to not have to go to work. Like at least I would have some proof because I just need a break. And as crazy as that sounds, I quickly thought, okay, Mina, you are a believing Christian. You cannot be thinking about harming yourself just because you want a break. So I talked to my counselor about these feelings that I was feeling, and I knew that they weren't right, but I needed more help. And the short story is that in July, mid-July, I went to my local hospital and walked up to the psychiatric behavioral department and told them what I was going through. And they immediately admitted me for suicidal ideation. And I found myself on short-term disability and FMLA for 3 months. And I was entered into this intensive outpatient psychiatric program. So here I am now. I have all this word in me, but I'm in a room I'm in a group therapy with schizophrenics, bipolar disorder people who have PTSD, anxiety, and depression. And now I have to go to this therapy treatment 5 days a week, every single day for 3 months to deal with my stuff. And I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety. They, of course, wanted to medicate me and give me, pills to take and all that stuff. But I found myself in this place where I could not run from my past. I could not run from my mother wounds, my father wounds, divorce, abandonment, rejection, all of these different things. And I went there every day for 3 months. And every 2 weeks, I was still seeing my Christian counselor, which was necessary because I needed to have that balance of receiving treatment from a clinical standpoint, but then also having biblically based counseling. And so
were you living at the facility during this time?
No, I was in an outpatient program. So I was able to go home every day and then come every day.
Did it feel like you were kind of in this desert or this daze or this tunnel like during this period?
Yes, I would say for the first month, I probably came home every day and just slept for hours and hours because it was so heavy, because I'm in a room with other people who are just like me, but we're all trying to figure out how to cope. And these issues in our life have manifested themselves in different ways. All of us have dealt with trauma. But I'm hearing about one person who has, they're holding grief from their wife passing away. And it happened 20 years ago, but it basically seemed like it happened yesterday. Or someone who's had 26 suicide attempts or someone who has PTSD from a traumatic event from when they were little. And I'm like, how did I get here? It just was so heavy, so very, very heavy. And it was,
I was just going to say, this is incredible from the standpoint that you went to counseling for help, and it looks like seemingly things got worse before they got better.
Well, my counselor did tell me at the beginning that this is not going to be an easy ride, but if you participate in your own rescue, basically, there will be victory at the end. And, you know, you hear that and you're just like, oh, okay, well, no, she was actually right. And you want to know the interesting thing that I think is hilarious now is that even during this process, my 1 year of no dating had expired. I was still going out on dates. Just as jacked up. I was still going on dates here and there. And of course, now on the back end, I'm just like, that was the dumbest thing to do. I mean, nothing ever came of those things, but there were people that were in my program who were married. And obviously, if you're married, that's completely different. But there were people who were also dating in the program. And it's like, how can you even present your best self when you are dealing with all this muck and garbage and trying to clean yourself up? So yeah, I went out every now and again, but it wasn't the best thing to do. At the end of it all, though, I came out victorious. I ended up seeing my Christian counselor for about 10 months. So basically almost a year. And at the end, she told me that I had a ministry towards women. And I said, the devil is a lie. And she said that my story was so rich and that I had so much to share that. And also because of what God was able to do in the season of progressive healing, that it would be a disservice to now be healed and whole and not reach back and lift up another sister and share and try to bring her up too. So that kind of was the birth of Mina Says.
So the birth of Mina Says takes place. Your progressive healing is taking place. You're living in a new normal, and now here you are a few years later, and you're starting to notice, as you said to me, that there is this void of information that's not being shared. There's an oversaturation of relationship experts, but they're only speaking from one angle or from one component. And so let's talk about that a little bit. What for you became this notion of something not being balanced teaching or balanced presentation, particularly for single ladies that are a part of the faith community, the body of Christ, that are walking with God?
Well, it's something that continues to, I guess, annoy me even more each day. But and you and I have talked in years past about some of my anxiety about not being married by a certain age, and there's societal pressure, there's familial pressure, and there's even pressure in the church community about timelines. And I know sometimes that's not said word for word verbatim, but sometimes inadvertently there are messages that say to women that almost as if you're not really a woman, or you're not really valuable, or your life really doesn't mean anything until you get married and start a family and things like that. And those are things that I thought that I would be married at least by my early 30s. I thought I would be done having children, and that just has not been my story. I mean, I do desire it. God knows all of the desires of my heart, but it's apparent that my timeline is different than his timeline. And so what do you do with your life when you desire something, it hasn't happened, and you're doing all these things that people who have this in the marketplace are telling you to do? Clean your credit up, break the cycles of your past, learn how to cook, learn how to clean your house, do these 7 steps so that you can prepare for your husband. What happens when you do those things, in air quotes, and then it still doesn't happen for you? Then what does that mean about the quality of your life? Where's the value? Did God just save us just so that we could get married? Like, is that part of the consolation prize of salvation? No, it's not. And so I just had these questions, and I felt like people in my demographic, the 35 and up group, are not having necessarily the kind of conversation that's pertinent or the same for younger people.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. You've heard just a little bit about Mina's story. And in part 2 of A Woman's Story, we go even further about what does it look like when seemingly God doesn't answer your prayer, and how do our timelines and our heart's desires line up with what God intends and plans to do. Mina goes even deeper into her story about singleness, and even what that has looked like in the church, what that has looked like in corporate America, and how she's navigated all of that. And I promise you, you will be able to see many aspects of your own life story in her story. So much wisdom. And in fact, she said it during part 1 of this particular podcast, that her story is in fact rich. Your story is rich. And I want to personally invite you to come back for part 2 of A Woman's Story with Mina Nyenke. As she talks about her story, you will find yourself in your story as well, and what God in fact wants to do in your life. So as we wrap up, every single week we invite you, please spread the word. Please help us tell folks about the Wise Idea podcast. We are on iTunes and Stitcher and TuneIn and Google Play, and coming soon to other platforms. But listen, I would love and be honored for you to leave a review on iTunes. Let us know what you think, how you're being blessed, how you're being inspired. Of course, all of the show notes and things that we've talked about are right there in the podcast. You can go to the show notes and check those out. I will look forward to seeing you next week for part 2 of A Woman's Story. You know how I end every single week. Be wise.